Somewhere under the streets of Cincinnati, there's an entire subway system that has never carried a single passenger. In Washington, giant nuclear cooling towers stand in the middle of nowhere, even though the power plant they were built for was never finished. And in New Orleans, a massive theme park was left to rot after the water disappeared. These places weren't built to be abandoned. Millions, and in some cases billions, were spent on them. People genuinely believed they were building the future. But then the money ran out, plans collapsed, disasters happened, and some of America's biggest projects were simply left behind. Today, we're looking at 7 failed American megaprojects that became ruins. And some of these projects came unbelievably close to actually working. Number 7 is Fordlandia. Technically, Fordlandia was built in Brazil, but the man and the American company behind it came straight from Detroit. In the 1920s, Henry Ford was one of the most powerful businessmen in the world. His factories were producing millions of cars, but those cars needed huge amounts of rubber for tires, hoses, and other parts. At the time, much of the world's rubber supply came from British-controlled plantations in Asia, and Ford didn't like depending on outside suppliers. So Henry Ford came up with an extremely ambitious plan. Instead of buying rubber from someone else, he would create his own rubber empire. In 1927, the Ford Motor Company received a massive piece of land in the Amazon rainforest. The company planned to grow millions of rubber trees and produce enough rubber to support Ford's giant automobile business. But Ford didn't just want to build a plantation. He wanted to create an American-style city in the middle of the Amazon jungle. Workers were given American-style houses, and the town had roads, a hospital, a swimming pool, and even a golf course. American food was introduced, strict working hours were created, and Ford's managers tried to bring the lifestyle of small-town America into one of the wildest environments on Earth. From a distance, Fordlandia looked like a small piece of the United States had suddenly appeared inside the rainforest. But there was one massive problem. The people running the project didn't fully understand the Amazon. Rubber trees naturally grow far apart in the rainforest, but at Fordlandia, thousands of trees were planted close together in straight lines. This made the plantation a perfect target for disease and insects, and the rubber trees began to die. Things weren't going much better with the workers. Local employees were expected to follow strict American rules. Alcohol was banned, unfamiliar food was served, and even parts of their daily schedules were controlled. In 1930, tensions finally exploded. Angry workers destroyed parts of the town, and managers were reportedly forced to escape until order could be restored. The project continued for years, but the rubber dream never truly worked. By 1945, Ford had spent millions of dollars without creating the successful rubber empire he had imagined. The company eventually gave up and sold its interests back to the Brazilian government. Today, parts of Fordlandia still stand in the Amazon. Old industrial buildings, water towers, houses, and other structures remain surrounded by jungle. It looks like a forgotten American town slowly being swallowed by nature. Henry Ford tried to control an entire industry and reshape a piece of the Amazon, but instead, he created one of the strangest failed mega projects in history. Number 6 is the Bellefonte nuclear plant. In northern Alabama, a massive industrial complex rises above the surrounding landscape. Huge concrete structures stand silent, unfinished spaces remain empty, and equipment once meant to help produce enormous amounts of electricity never completed its original mission. This is the Bellefonte nuclear plant, one of America's most famous unfinished nuclear projects. Construction began in the 1970s. At the time, electricity demand in America was expected to grow rapidly, and nuclear power was seen by many as an important part of the country's energy future. The Tennessee Valley Authority planned several nuclear projects, and Bellefonte was designed to become a major power-producing facility. The project included 2 nuclear reactors, and construction continued for years. Thousands of workers were involved, complex systems were installed, and billions of dollars were invested. At one point, the first reactor was reported to be close to completion. From the outside, it seemed like Bellefonte was almost ready to become a major part of America's energy system. Then the situation changed. Electricity demand did not grow as quickly as expected, nuclear construction became increasingly expensive, and concerns about nuclear safety were becoming more serious. The financial reasons for finishing Bellefonte became weaker, and in 1988, construction was stopped. But Bellefonte didn't simply disappear. Over the following decades, there were repeated discussions about completing the plant. New plans appeared, companies showed interest, and officials debated whether the massive facility could finally be used. Each time, hope returned, but the plant still failed to reach its original purpose. The giant structures remain a reminder of how quickly America's energy plans can change. Bellefonte was built for a future that planners believed was almost certain. But that future never arrived, leaving behind a massive unfinished industrial monument. Number 5 is the Cincinnati Subway. Under the busy streets of Cincinnati, Ohio, there is a hidden transportation system that most people never see. Dark tunnels stretch beneath roads, empty underground spaces sit in silence, and concrete platforms wait for passengers who never arrived. This is the Cincinnati Subway, and despite all the construction work that went into it, the system has never carried a single paying passenger. The idea began in the early 1900s when Cincinnati was growing and traffic was becoming a serious problem. City leaders believed the city needed a modern transportation system, and their solution was an underground railway. In 1916, voters approved funding for the project, and Cincinnati appeared ready to join other major American cities with advanced public transportation. Then America entered World War I, and the project was delayed. When construction finally started in 1920, inflation had already increased costs. The original budget was no longer enough to build the complete subway system, but workers continued digging anyway. Several miles of tunnels were constructed beneath Cincinnati, and underground stations began taking shape. The basic structure of a real subway system was there, but the money kept disappearing. By the late 1920s, construction had stopped, leaving the tunnels unfinished. Then came the Great Depression, followed years later by World War II. Cincinnati had other priorities, and by the time the city was again able to consider major transportation projects, American life had completely changed. Cars were becoming more popular, highways were expanding, and many people no longer believed an underground railway was necessary. So the tunnels were simply left beneath the city. For more than a century, these empty spaces have remained underground while millions of people drive above them. Many residents can pass through Cincinnati every day without realizing that an unfinished subway system is sitting beneath their feet. Over the years, officials and developers have suggested different uses for the tunnels. There have been ideas about new rail systems, public transportation projects, storage spaces, and other developments. But none of the major plans have completely transformed the abandoned system. Number 4 is Michigan Central Station. For decades, Michigan Central Station was one of the most powerful symbols of Detroit's decline. The massive building opened in 1913 and immediately became one of the city's most impressive landmarks. Its grand waiting room had huge ceilings and beautiful architectural details, while an 18-story office tower rose above the station. At the time, Detroit was growing rapidly. Thousands of people passed through Michigan Central Station, soldiers left for war from its platforms, families arrived looking for new opportunities, and business travelers moved through its enormous halls. Detroit was becoming the center of America's automobile industry, and the station stood like a palace welcoming people into the city. But there was a strange twist. The same automobile industry that made Detroit incredibly rich also helped weaken the station. Americans began buying more cars, highways expanded across the country, and air travel became easier. Passenger train use slowly declined, and large railway stations started losing their importance. By the 1980s, Michigan Central Station was struggling. Finally, in 1988, the last train left the station and the doors closed. What happened next turned the building into one of America's most famous ruins. Windows were smashed, water entered the structure, plants began growing inside, and graffiti covered the walls. Thieves removed valuable materials, and entire sections of the building were damaged. For years, the station stood empty above Detroit like a giant abandoned castle. But unlike most places on this list, Michigan Central Station received a second chance. Ford Motor Company purchased the building in 2018 and began a massive restoration project. After years of work, the station reopened in 2024 as the center of a new technology and innovation district. So yes, Michigan Central Station became a ruin, but its story didn't end there. For 30 years, it showed the world what happens when a massive piece of infrastructure loses its purpose. Then, against all expectations, one of America's most famous abandoned buildings came back to life. Number 3 is the Six Flags New Orleans theme park. In New Orleans, behind fences and warning signs, sits the remains of a theme park that looks frozen in time. Roller coaster tracks rise above the land, abandoned buildings slowly decay, and empty pathways lead through a place once filled with music, lights, and thousands of visitors. The park originally opened in 2000 as Jazzland. A few years later, Six Flags took control and renamed it Six Flags New Orleans. The company had big plans for the park and wanted to turn it into a major entertainment destination. Then, in August 2005, Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans. The storm caused catastrophic flooding across the city, and Six Flags New Orleans was heavily damaged. Much of the park sat in floodwater for weeks. Saltwater damaged rides, electrical systems, buildings, and equipment. When the water finally disappeared, the park was destroyed. Six Flags inspected the property, but repairing everything would cost an enormous amount of money. The park never reopened. And this is where the story became strange. Many of the rides and buildings were simply left behind. Over time, plants grew through the concrete, metal structures rusted, and the colorful theme park slowly turned gray and brown. Number 2 is Salton City, California. In the California desert, there is a strange place filled with empty roads and undeveloped land. From above, you can see streets spreading across the desert like a giant city map. The roads were built, the land was divided, and thousands of people were expected to arrive. But much of the city never came. This is Salton City, built beside the Salton Sea. During the 1950s and 1960s, developers believed the area could become a major California resort destination. Tourists came to swim, fish, and ride boats, and investors saw a huge opportunity. Developers planned a massive community with thousands of residential lots. Roads were constructed across the desert, and buyers were promised a future filled with homes, businesses, and tourists. For a short time, the dream looked possible. But the Salton Sea began facing serious environmental problems. The water became increasingly salty, fish died in huge numbers, and terrible smells pushed tourists away. Businesses struggled, and the big development plans slowly collapsed. Many planned neighborhoods in Salton City were never fully built. Roads that were supposed to lead to houses instead ended in empty desert. Thousands of lots remained undeveloped. Today, people still live in Salton City, but much of the original mega project never became what developers imagined. From the air, the failed dream is still clearly visible. A giant network of empty streets waiting for a city that never arrived. Number 1 is Buffalo Central Terminal. In the late 1920s, Buffalo, New York, was one of America's busiest railroad cities. To prepare for an even bigger future, officials built the Buffalo Central Terminal, one of the largest and most beautiful train stations in the country. When it opened in 1929, it featured a massive 17-story tower, grand waiting halls, marble floors, restaurants, and shops. It was designed to handle thousands of passengers every day and was seen as a symbol of modern America. But the timing couldn't have been worse. Just a few months after the station opened, the Great Depression hit. Passenger numbers never reached the levels people had expected. Then, after World War II, Americans began traveling by car and airplane instead of train. As highways expanded and air travel became cheaper, rail travel slowly declined, leaving the huge station with fewer and fewer visitors. By 1979, the final passenger train left Buffalo Central Terminal, and the station officially closed. Over the next few decades, broken windows, water damage, vandalism, and neglect transformed the once grand building into one of America's most famous abandoned landmarks. Its empty halls and towering structure attracted photographers, filmmakers, and urban explorers from around the world. Today, restoration efforts are bringing parts of the terminal back to life, but much of the building still carries the feeling of its abandoned past. Buffalo Central Terminal stands as a reminder that even the grandest projects can become forgotten ruins when the world changes faster than anyone expected. For years, these mega projects were supposed to represent America's future. Nuclear plants promised unlimited energy, subway tunnels promised faster cities, giant stations connected millions of people, and massive entertainment projects promised endless growth. But every one of these places teaches the same lesson. A project can have billions of dollars, powerful companies, famous investors, and some of the best engineers in the world, and still fail. So which of these failed mega projects surprised you the most? And is there another massive American ruin that should be on this list? Tell me in the comments below. If you enjoyed exploring these forgotten places, hit the like button and subscribe because there are many more abandoned cities, failed projects, and forgotten places waiting to be discovered. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.